So today we'll discuss about accounts payable, or we'll call it as a procure to pay. So let us discuss about the cycle of the accounts payable cycle. Then we'll proceed further. Yeah. So initially, first we'll identify the requirements. I mean, there will be separate. For example, in case if there is a in a Reliance company, there will be multiple departments, right? So from each and every department, they will identify what are the requirements for any like even for procurement or manufacturing or anything it may be. Since for example, this Reliance will have a like Reliance Fresh is here, and then even in Reliance Fresh also there will be fruits, vegetables, and all, right. So for example, for every department they will raise in requirements like how many what is the quantity that they're looking for, and within how many days they are looking. So all these things based on their stock availability, everything, all this they'll identify the requirements here. So once they identify the requirements, a purchase requisition note will be prepared by the procurement team. So there will be a separate team which is involved only in the like they will create a purchase requisition from each and every department with a list of the quantities or whatever the information that they have gathered from all the departments. They'll create a purchase requisition note, and then after creating the purchase requisition note, once it is approved, and the next step is first they'll start identifying the vendors in the market. So they will check for the list of the vendors. Since for every product there will be specific vendors, right? So for and that too, even in this list of the vendors, they'll check which vendor is providing these products at the best price, and then terms of payment, because company might be having a few terms of payments, and then they'll be having certain rules and regulations, deliveries, or there will be a lot of things to consider when selecting this vendor. So all those things will be they will categorize, and then they will select the so whichever the vendor they meet the requirements of this from the company. Like as I mentioned, there will be like due date, purchase order, payment terms, bank payments. There are a lot of things will be there. So initially they will discuss all these things with the vendors. So once they identify, they will list on the vendors all these things. Once the vendor list is selected, the next step is they will have to create a purchase order here. Purchase order in the sense, like for example, after creating this purchase requisition note, the details whatever they are mentioned in the purchase requisition note itself. Let us say Reliance wants to purchase any machinery. So if they want to purchase any machinery or any products, like any groceries or anything it may be, from this list of the vendors, they will select the. They have finalized one or multiple vendors, right? So they will receive the quotations. So let me also add it here. Since they receive the quotations from all these vendors, right? So once they finalize any of these quotation, they will send in purchase order. This purchase order will contain all the details of the products and the due date, and when they are expecting this delivery, and what sort of transport or anything it may be that is related to products. So once PO is created, anyway we will be discussing how to create this purchase requisition note, how to upload this one, how to create this list of the vendors, purchase order, all these things in the next step. So that this is just an idea. This is just to discuss what is the cycle of accounts payable here. So this is how it will start in any company. So first PO will be created, and then once we create a PO, it will be sent to the vendor. So once PO is sent, we'll receive a GRN. I hope you are aware about that. GRN is nothing but goods receipt notes, or here we'll call it a product receipt note. Both of them. So once we receive goods in the any of the warehouse, then customer will so vendor will be sending in the details of whatever the details he has sent, right? So we will be from the warehouse, they will issue a goods receipt note stating that yes, we have received these goods. And once we issue the goods receipt note, see there are chances where vendor might send a invoice along with the GRN, or else once GRN is sent, later they can send invoice as well. Anything can happen. So one thing we have to remember, whenever vendor has sent invoice to us, right, that is where our liability will start. See, till we receive the goods, we do not have any legal obligation. You see, of course PO itself will be considered as a legal obligation, but since is for a accounting purpose, the source document, we'll call this invoice as a source document, right? This invoice or a GRN, PO, all these documents, will call it as a source documents. So once we receive the invoice from the vendor, that is where our liability will start. That means we till here, the journal entries whatever we that are going to generate, right? Once we receive the goods, asset. See, whenever we receive goods, is nothing but an asset for us. So once we receive the goods, the asset will be increased. So there will be journal entry for or financial impact will start from here itself. And then once the invoice is sent, we are supposed to pay it. For example, let's say vendor has sent 100 rupees worth of goods. Once we receive the goods, we do not have any information, like even though this purchase order will have a due date or anything, but for particular invoice also there will be a due date, right? For example, PO we might have raised for, let's say, 1,000 goods, and also we have informed customer these 1,000 goods to be shipped in shipped in multiple shipments. For example, like let's say 5 or 6 or anything. So based on our recommendation, or based on the customer, based on the vendor availability, whatever the goods, or based on his stock availability, he will be sending the goods in multiple shipments, right? So that's the reason once we receive an invoice, that is where our liability will start. So once the liability start, in the sense we are obligated to, we are we will have an obligation to pay the vendor payment. But before doing this invoice payment, we will see, for example, there are chances we might have done any prepayment before receiving goods itself, like we'll have to check whether if you have done any partial prepayment or nothing as such, like advance booking, because few vendors. In case if we have done any partial prepayment for that particular vendor, just because we receive an invoice, that doesn't mean that we have to pay the full amount. So there is a step here. We'll have to check whether if there is a partial prepayment or any method of payment. So all these things. For example, if customer is requested only for the check payment or electronic payment, while creating the vendor itself, we will update all those details. What kind of payment method he is expecting, all these things. So this method of payments, all these things we'll discuss in the coming class. And then so once we confirm about this partial prepayment everything, we'll have to apply that. For example, the invoice amount is 100 rupees, and we have already paid some 20 or 30 rupees, and the rest of the amount we are supposed to pay. So it's like that. So here, before doing this partial payment, we'll also do invoice validation as well. So this once the invoice validation is done, that means we'll compare the products as per the invoice and then GRN, and then the purchase order. In case if the goods, in case we do not have any goods here, if it is a service order, there won't be GRN, but still we will update it as a service. Even the service also will call it as a product here. For that purpose, we'll compare the invoice with the PO. Anyways, those scenarios, like how to do this invoice validation with regards to products, and then with if there is any service order, all these things we can discuss while creating the purchase order and this purchase request note, goods receipt note, all these things we can discuss in further. So once the invoice validation, this check for the partial payments on this, after checking all these things, we will have to create the payment proposal. For example, let us say that we have some 1,000 or 2,000 vendors. So for every vendor, he might be having his own payment terms and conditions, right? We'll have to create all these methods of payment. For example, in a month, on daily basis, there will be a due date for each vendor or multiple vendors. So for that reason, we'll have to create a payment proposal based on the practice that organization is following. Let us say like weekly ones, or 2 days ones, or 3 days ones, anything it may be. So once we pull the report, like this payment proposal report, we'll get the list of the vendors with the due dates, everything. So once the payment proposal is created, we'll have to we'll start doing the payments. So there are a few steps, like posting the vendor invoice journals, and then payment related all these things. This is just an overview, how does an accounts payable works. So once the payment proposal is created, yeah, so before this payment proposal, there's one more step. So even after doing this invoice validation, let us say, for example, whatever the goods we have received from the vendor, right? If there is something, or if there are any missing goods, or let us say if you want to return any of these goods, for that purpose, we'll have to raise a credit note here. Credit note will be prepared. Missing goods or any return damage. So we'll prepare a credit note in any of these scenarios. Once all these things are done, then only we'll create a payment proposal. Once the payment proposal is done, there are multiple ways. For example, if the vendor is has requested us to, or he has told us to do the payments in cash method, or for example, or else instead of cash, if he is expecting to do any receive any electronic payment method, all these things we already, while creating the vendor itself, will update all those methods of payment. So even after preparing this payment proposal, depending on the payment method, we'll be sending the list of the transactions with the vendor. If it is a bank payment, or electronic fund transfer, we'll be sending the details to the bank, and then bank will do the payments, like for each and every vendor separately. In case if there is a check payment, then we'll start issuing the check, and we'll also issue the confirmation, or check receipt or check payment receipt, etc. So this is a accounts payable cycle. See the terminology, whatever you have seen, right? So it will be most commonly same. Even though, like here sometimes we will there is no such hard and fast rule, like third and three-way matching, two-way matching. We'll just call it as a two-way matching, but sometimes even for there will be three-way matching even for service also. Anyways, those we'll discuss once we start creating this purchase order or any. There are a lot of parameters that we'll have to select. While for example, if you want, what are the main accounts that are impacting? For example, whenever you are doing the payment, right, there will be a financial impact. The cash will be reduced from our bank account. That means we'll have to post all those entries. All those journal entries will be posted by default from backend. That we'll see once we post any purchase order. So till here, are you clear about what is a process that we are going to follow in D365?
Bro.
Yeah. Ritesh?
Yeah, bro. Yeah, fine, Srinivas.
Okay. So this is an overview of the accounts payable cycle, and then we'll go to see first important thing is, so here let me see we can classify the topics under accounts payable in a, for example, invoices. Okay, we'll name it as a source document. The source document is nothing but an invoice. Invoice GRN, credit note, PO. We have already discussed about these source documents, like what do you mean by PO, and again there will be different types of POs, like blanket PO. So all those things, it is for just for your knowledge purpose. You can explore all those things because those will be more sometimes it will be created by the supply chain management team, where they'll be involved into different, like they'll be having the discussions with the vendors, all those things. And then later, once we are done with all this the basic terminology, then we'll go to the methods of payment. See, methods of payment, or will there are different types of payment. For example, not just okay, instead of calling it as a methods of payment, we'll call it as a due dates. How to calculate due dates related. For example, every vendor will have an due date, right? But it is not easy for us to remember the due date of each and every vendor separately. So for that reason, we will have to uh, search for any or what are the possible ways to ensure that the vendor is not missing his payment. For that purpose, we have multiple ways that's of payment, and then payment days. There are any cash discounts that we are supposed to get in case if there is any early payment. We might have entered with an agreement with the vendor, right? uh, like if you pay 10 days before of the due date, you are eligible for 5% discount or 10% discount. So all these things. So let me show you in the environment, for example. And the navigation would be in the home page, accounts payable. So once you click on the accounts payable, you can see all the options here. by creating the vendors, these purchase orders, these payments related. Once we do the payment, these are invoice related. Yeah. So even if you see, it will be like in a sequence order. Like once you have to create the vendors, and then after creating the vendors, will creating the purchase orders, right? And then different types of purchase orders will be there. So once a purchase order is issued, we'll receive an goods receipt note and then invoice. So once we receive the invoice, the payments will be done. So if you see here, it will be in a sequence order. Again, under all vendors also, there are different types of subfields will be there. If you want to check reports with regards to vendors on hold or vendors, see the vendor groups. You can create multiple vendor groups here, like domestic, wholesale, international, any such, and then purchase orders also. If you want to create this, see, we'll be looking into this purchase orders only, and then this is purchase orders assigned to me in the sense, for example, if you're an end user, they will be having an purchase orders up a hierarchy, right, to approve any purchase orders. So and then this purchase agreement, so these all these purchase agreements will be dealt by the supply chain management. These open prepayments, as I mentioned, if you have done any prepayment to the customer, sorry, to the vendor, so all those details can be visible here. If you want to check any pending vendor invoices, all these things can be here. The invoice journal. Yeah. This is an invoice register. Invoice register is where you can, if you want to create a new invoice for any of the vendor, you can come here and you can create the invoice register here. This is related to payment related. Whenever we are doing the payment, right, before doing the payment proposal, so here you will get the payment. First, you have to post the payment journal, and then payment will be done. Even this broker and royalties, we will not be looking into this. Um, like supply chain management, or there is a separate team, they will be looking into this. And inquiries and reports, there will be multiple reports, right, in this accounts payable module. For example, if you want to pull report of product receipt, vendor aging report, vendor transaction. So based on the requirement, we'll have to pull these reports. There are exclusive vendor reports here. Purchase order reports are there. Invoice related reports. This payment related reports. And then there are few periodic tasks as well, because when we deal with multiple currencies, we'll have to do a foreign currency revaluation also, right? Based on the currency exchange rate, whether so all those details will be updated. I mean, those actions can be done in this foreign currency revaluation. Uh, See, periodic tasks in the sense, in general, irrespective of the due date. Let us say it is not related to any of the due date. Every month or weekly once, we'll be having a periodic task, right? Like preparing month-end report or a quarterly report, yearly report. So all those actions, whatever we are supposed to do, those this heading will help you to create all those things. And the setup. See, setup. See, if you want to perform any of these actions, right? Like creating the vendors. See, once you create the vendors, you will have to assign the main accounts, method of payment. So see, these are separate. Like creating the vendor is a separate topic, and then the purchase order is separate, invoice is separate. All these are separate. But whenever you want to link, for example, once you open the vendor, you should be able to see what type of transactions he has, done with us, and what are the payment methods. Everything, all those things we are supposed to give in the parameters. In every module, there will be setup. So this is where these are the most important things which you have to keep in mind. One is accounts payable matters, parameters, and the posting profiles. These two will be there in every module: parameters and posting profiles. Parameters is nothing but there are a lot of things, as I mentioned. What type of methods? If you open the parameters, there are we can discuss that one. And the posting profiles. always remember posting profile. Profile is nothing but whenever you are posting any invoice related to particular vendor, right? Where is that financial impact is going to happen? If which account is going to get impacted? This is a link where you will have to connect, or it's kind of we'll call it as a string of accounts. For example, whenever you're doing payment, right? Anyway, we'll discuss about these journal entries later as well. But let me just give you an example. Accounts payable, simple. Whenever we receive goods, right? So what will be the journal entry? We'll be receiving the goods. That means purchases. So once we receive a goods, right, we are supposed to pay to the vendor, right? So we'll do the payment, cash or bank. So yes, see the journal entry, you are aware. Whenever we receive the goods, the asset it will be increased. For that reason, we'll be debiting that purchases or goods as a debit account. And whenever we are doing the payment, right, from our end, the cash is going on. So as per the golden rule concept, all these expenses or payments, expenses or incomes or assets, all this see purchases, it will come under real account. And then this cash or bank account, it since the cash is going out, we'll credit this as a cash account. Will be credited here. But you should understand how does this purchase account or this, because we are whenever you are posting this any of the invoice, right, you will not create this journal entry. We'll be posting only invoice, but this journal entry will be created by the system itself, by backend. So how does it creates? To create this journal entry, that is where we'll have to give all these parameters or posting profile. So this posting profile is nothing but it is linking the vendor while posting any of the transactions. Uh, what kind of, or what are the main accounts that are supposed to get affected? So all those things are discussed here. Like purchase account. See here we'll not call it as a purchase accounts. Will There are a lot of main accounts which are involved here, like accounts payable, uh, you know, or cost of goods sold. So all those things will be linked in the posting profile. So let me just open this posting profile and will show you. See, anyway, we'll discuss all these fields in the coming class. Like this is how it looks. Summary account will have to give. These are related to setup and the policy setup. Even this also will not involve much. And the invoice matching setup is invoice matching setup. There is an automate. See, we haven't advanced feature in this Dynamics 365 where you need not to do manual matching, like two-way matching or three-way matching are there, right? We can give some configuration. We can give some setups or certain terms and conditions. So based on that, the automation can be done in terms of matching related as well, like price tolerances. For example, if there is any uh, tolerance, if there is a difference between the invoice and purchase order, uh, till what amount the invoice can be uh, allowed for approval. So all those things we'll discuss in this invoice matching setup here. And the charges setup. So charges setup will help you to create a or configure charges codes that is they are related to vendors. For example, whenever you are purchasing goods from any of the vendor, right? So there are different types of charges are involved, like labor charge will be there, and then insurance will be there, outward freight or inward freight. You might have heard all these things. In warehouse, these charges are mostly common. Whenever this Reliance, when they receive the products from the vendor, right, in the warehouse, they have to pay for labor. See, all these charges, for example, there are different ways of evaluating these charges. For example, sometimes customer might pay. Here in our case, Reliance is a customer, right? In case if Reliance has agreed to pay all these charges to the vendor, then it will be shown as an expense, or as per their accounting system, it will be shown in the Reliance books stating that this is an expense to Reliance company. Or sometimes few vendors they'll tell that we'll bear all the expenses, just give me the full amount. So at that time, the expenses whatever they are covered, right, under vendor. So all those things. So all these charges codes will have to give it here, and what type of main accounts are affecting. Because even this also something which is related to financial impact on it, right? Because we are paying for labor. That means you are incurring some expenses, or let's say insurance. Insurance also sometimes vendor will tell that yes, we will bear the insurance expenses for the whenever they are transporting the or shipping the goods. Sometimes customer has to bear the insurance expenses. Since these expenses cannot be clubbed into main product price, right? So they will have to show it separately, because you will not get an invoice for all these things from the vendor for the labor, everything. He will, in the invoice he will mention only about the cost of the product whatever he is selling to us. But what about the rest of the expenses? If you want to record all the rest of the expenses, for that purpose we'll have to create this charges code, item charge groups. There are a lot of things are there. And there is a final step which is most important, that is payment setup. So here in the payment setup, as I mentioned, calculating due date is very much important, because there will be multiple vendors. You should not miss any of the vendor payment as per the due date, because or else it will impact the business itself. So for that purpose, we'll have to ensure that whatever the ways are there to identify the payment due date, we'll update here. For example, methods of payment. Methods of payment is nothing but there are different types of methods, right, to do payment, like cash, check, and then electronic fund transfer, DD. And then a few countries have separate payment methods as well. Country specific also it will be there. That also we can discuss. And the payment days. This is all. This will help you to give more accurate about the due date. Even though methods of payment is just a type of payment, but payment days is nothing but, for example, within how many days the invoice should be generated, or so the invoice should enter into the payment proposal. Let's say like today we have received, after 1 month, in case if the invoice is supposed to get payment, then we'll have to select the payment days. So once we create any of these payment days, we'll understand. And payment schedules. Payment schedules is nothing but like EMI, we can say. Whenever you receive any product from the vendor, if you have entered into an agreement stating that I'll do this payment in multiple schedules, like 3, 5, or 10 as per the agreement, then you have to create the payment schedules here, so that whenever you fill a report or whenever you give the due date, right, these payment schedules, as per the payment schedule, will get the report. This terms of payment is also similar. It is an extension, or it is a continuation to these payment days. So wherein, for example, if you want to do payment after receiving the invoice, let's say from month plus 15 days or 20 days. So there is a difference between the payment days and terms of payment. We'll try to create the terms, 2, 3 examples of this terms of payment and payment days here. And the cash discounts. Cash discounts is nothing but if you are eligible for any early payment discount to the vendor. System is not aware like what kind of discounts you are getting, right? So all those things we'll have to update here. Let's say if you are paying when into any vendor before 10 days or before 5 days, by default system will calculate the discount. you cannot remember for each and every vendor, right? Like like 5% or 3% or anything it may be. If you just give this as a cash discount, and while posting the invoice or while creating the vendor itself, if you apply this cash discount, whenever you're doing payment for that particular invoice, by default system will calculate the cash discount. Yeah. So there is something, these cover page for payments report. We'll have to look into that. What is it? And then payment calendar configuration also we'll discuss. Like for example, it is not like a fiscal calendar or any due date calendar for a normal calendar, right? So even for payment also we have to create a calendar. Maybe in case if we have an internal holidays, our report, like in a year we might be having our own holidays apart from the government holidays or the fiscal calendar, right? So we can create that calendar and the configuration. Yeah. So these are the few important topics that we are going to discuss. The reason why I have explained all these uh, you know topics is like these headings of these topics is, whenever if someone asks you that what do you mean by accounts payable, you should be able to visualize the things. Even though if you are not able to explain, you should know like what all features are available, or in case if if you get a question, like what are the important things we have to consider while doing this accounts payable. You should be able to explain the process, like creating the vendors or these purchase orders, this payment proposal. These are very important. As I mentioned, the setup, right? So without having a setup, you cannot link all these things. The posting profiles, this is very important. In every interview they'll ask this, what do you mean by posting profiles? See, posting profiles will be there in every module. Like even in accounts receivable also you have to link, right, posting profiles. See, whatever these topics are very important. That's the reason you should remember. So going forward, whenever we are going to start with the discussing each and every topic wise, right? Then immediately you should understand why are we discussing this payment setup? What is the method of what do you mean by methods of payment? How does it helps? Yeah. So this is a overview about the accounts payable, and then in the coming class we'll start configuring these methods of payment, payment days, payment schedules, terms of payment, cash discounts. So we'll try to cover, if it is possible, we'll cover all these five topics in the same class, or else we'll take two classes. So once we are done with this payment setup, then we'll start creating the vendors, and then we'll start. There are list of the topics we can prepare. Reports we'll discuss in the last, any of these module, right? Inquiries and reports, like how to pull the reports, what is the purpose of each and every report, it will be the last topic of that module. Because once you generate the transactions, that is where you can pull the report. So that's the reason. Yeah. So do you have any doubts here?
No.